Hey, it's your girl Pebbles. I hope you're having a great day so far. Today I decided to share my slave castle experience in Ghana. I had an epiphany yesterday morning, and I realized that I stood in a dungeon where, for the diaspora, many of our ancestors were held captive. And I also realized that very dungeon I stood in, a castle I stepped foot on, several years prior, I saw a movie that changed my life, which led me to the slave castle. And although I was there, I didn't make the connection. So the movie I'm referring to is Sankofa. If you haven't seen it, it is a must, especially if you are within a diaspora. For me, it was life-changing. I've never heard of the movie before until it was shown in the Africana Studies class I was taking by Michelle Wright. She's the best. And from that day, like, I always had a love for history. I always had a love for Black history. But when I watched that movie, it changed something in me, and I became obsessed with learning more about my people, about our ancestors, about the struggle, about the beauty in it all. And so today I'm going to share some video and pictures of Cape Coast Castle, one of the slave castles, and just tell you my experience. But before I do that, I need to sage and make sure that I'm properly sharing the information. And plus, it's heavy. It's a heavy topic. It's thick. And so I want to cleanse myself first. I'm going to start sharing my crystals with you all, like what I carry around. I have my clear crystal quartz, clear vision. And I don't know the name of this one, I forgot. It's a mixture. It's actually quartz and a mixture of, I don't know, some blue. But blue is also for the third eye and for clear communication. So I want to make sure I'm communicating right when I share this information. So let me cleanse first. Okay, so I'm back. Here we go. So in Ghana, or I should say West Africa, they have about 40 slave castles between Senegal and Ghana, where they took enslaved Africans. I'm going to make sure I keep saying it throughout this video, because the Africans they kidnapped. They weren't slaves. They were Africans who were enslaved. We have to stop normalizing, and we have to stop thinking that our story for those who are over here started here, because it didn't. And so I'm going to keep making mention of that. The main two castles you may hear of or hear about are Cape Coast and Elmina. We were going to visit both, but we got behind in time, and so we only made it to Cape Coast, which was completely fine with me, because for me, one was enough, in a day. I was good with the one we went to. But also, it's just how in divine order it worked out that I ended up going to the one where Sankofa was filmed, which led me there. Like I said a few moments ago, the movie that changed my life. I was not surprised, or I knew I wasn't going to be surprised about what I heard as far as the history, what happened there, because I study a lot on that topic. So I wasn't bracing myself for what they were going to say. I wasn't bracing myself for, to hear of all the torture that the Africans went through, the rape of men and women and children. Yes, the men were raped too. Just the slaughter. I wasn't surprised, or I knew I wasn't going to be surprised at how it looked, of how it smelled, because you still smell a stench of them being there. You can still smell, remnants of the feces, because they had hundreds of them packed in little small areas, in little quarters, and that's where they slept, that's where they ate, that's where they went to the bathroom, that's where many of them died. I wasn't surprised of any of that. And I've talked to people in the past before going, people that went prior to me, and they was like, I was surprised at the treatment of them. I was surprised of, smelling. I was just surprised. So I wasn't, none of that was shocking to me. Well, what I will say though, was prior to going into the castle, I stood at the waters, and I'll include the pictures in here somewhere. And I've heard before that you can hear the cries and the screams of the people that were placed onto the ships and sent over to the New World, wherever they went. I had forgotten that. And the first place I ended up going, well, not me, I was led there, because this is all spirit. This is all God. It has nothing to do with me. I'm just being led, right? And I stood there. Jasmine was on one part. She was doing her thing, and I did my thing. And I didn't know anybody was near me or behind me. And I was like, oh my God. And I covered my ears, both of my ears with my hands. And I was like, I can hear them. I can hear them. And I began to cry because I can hear the voices in the water. I could hear, some of the slaves deciding to jump off and commit suicide because they knew it was better to be dead and have freedom in that than to be, enslaved, especially in a new world. I can hear that, and then I begin to see that. When you're tapped in, when you're in tune, visions are real. To be clairvoyant is real. To be clairaudient is real. If you don't know what that is, Google it, look it up. To be clairsentient is real. To be claircognitive is real. And so I was taken aback by that because I didn't prepare myself for that because I forgot. And it was a local behind me, and he was watching me apparently, and he was like, you're connected. He just started yelling at, you can hear, everybody can't hear, everybody can't see. So he knew what I was going through in that moment, in that spiritual moment. He knew that the ancestors were allowing me to see and hear and feel, right? So that set the tone for the entire tour. Gather myself, gather my thoughts, and I went in. I knew I would be good after that, because that in and of itself was an experience. And we started the tour, and I don't know if you ever seen a movie. If you haven't, again, watch it. You go inside where Mona, she was the slave. Well, she wasn't a slave. She was African American who went back for a photo shoot. I won't tell the whole storyline. And where you see her, where she walk in, and the sign says dungeon. I think we first went into the male dungeon, because the women and men were separated. And you walk in, and everything's the same. There's no light in there. Only light that you have in there is from a little tiny peephole that they have, which isn't much at all. So most of the light's going to come from if you turn your flashlight on with your phone. And you walk in, and you can feel the energies of everybody that was kept in there. I could see the torture. I could see them in the change, and I'm starting to get a little emotional, so bear with me. You can smell, like I said moments ago, the feces and the urine, the blood. All that's still there. How can something like that go away? I don't care if it's been this many years later, right? That type of energy just don't go away. You have to stay there. Because our ancestors knew that we were going to return. And you go into these little dungeons that they will hold 200-300 people in, and it's like, how in the world can all those people be in this little tiny space packed in for weeks and for some months at a time? How can anybody think that was okay to put somebody through that? And then you go into the woman's dungeon, which was even smaller. And for many of them, when they were on their cycle, they bled there to the point where the original floor of the place, you can't even see, which were like brick. You can't even see the brick because the amount of feces and blood and just all of that, it's stuck. It created its own surface on the floor. So at some parts where you can see the original floor, but the majority of it, you can't even see it. Because remember, this was going on for years. You have upstairs, where you can see the waters where they had the name is escaping me. The cannonballs, just in case they had to fight a war, whatever. That was upstairs. You have some of the slave captors buried up there. You have some of the Africans who sold the Africans buried up there, and oftentimes people that visit actually spit on their grave. And then you have the door of no return. And that was a pivotal part in the movie. Because, could you imagine? We can't even start to fathom what the Africans felt like or what they were thinking, what were going through their minds when they knew they stepped through this door and onto a ship and didn't know where they were going and know that they would never return. More than likely, they would never return. Could you imagine? Could you imagine somebody coming to your house today, taking you, putting you on a ship or a plane, not telling you where you're going? You can't understand the language. You don't know what's going on. You don't know who these people are. You're in chains, and they're taking you to another part of the world. Just place yourself in that situation for a minute. Outside of the diaspora, to all my Caucasian friends and others, place yourself in that situation for a moment and just imagine. Take away the hue of the melanated people and put yourself in that situation. Put your children in that situation. And then think about how the trauma was never dealt with. In fact, it's still going on. Imagine where you would be today. Imagine where your people would be today. A lot of times, people can't sympathize with you or empathize with you if they're not in a situation or if they've never been in a situation. I find it to be true for a lot of other cultures until it affect them somehow. So just use your imagination. I know it's hard for many people, especially adults. But use your imagination and just imagine if that was you or your family, your loved ones, your friends. So the next time you judge our culture, think about what we went through and how it hasn't been dealt with yet. For people, let's just say, that's been raped before, molested, the first thing we tell them is to get therapy. They need help because that's trauma. So why, when it comes to the Black culture, people don't understand that our trauma never been dealt with? And when you have undealt with trauma, you see more trauma because hurt people hurt people. You see a lot of mental health issues. So just keep that in mind. It's even really hard to explain being in such a place. And it's even harder to explain because it's like, you stand on the shoulders of people that went through that absolute most, right? But to be able to come back, to return, and to not only walk out that door of no return, but to turn back around. On the other side, an organization, I forgot who it was, came back years later and put on the other side, I believe it's the door of return. I'll include the pictures. But to be able to walk out the door of no return and feeling or kind of sort of being in the mindset of the Africans, right? And walking out, but being able to turn back around because they asked you to do that and walk back in, standing on the shoulders of your ancestors. It was wild. It was crazy. Standing in their legacy. They couldn't come back, but we did. And that's why it's important for the diaspora. You don't have to go to Ghana, but go somewhere on the continent of Africa. It's 54 countries on the continent. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that it's a continent and it's 54 different countries. And they're all different. People just think like South Africa and this is like one place. It's not. What goes on in one country has nothing to do with the next country. But it is our duty to return, to visit, to seek history, to seek knowledge, but more important, to pay homage to those who went through so much for us to be here today. Set aside all your thoughts and ignorant ideas about what Africa is about, because this country, all the pictures they painted, all the things they say, it's not true. They don't want you to know. They don't want you to go back and return because they know it will be too empowering, right? But at some point, we got to take accountability. We got to take responsibility and start thinking for ourselves. A lot of us are so quick to go to European countries. Okay, great, fun, whatever. But if you're within the diaspora, take your behind back to where you're from. And we're not even going to have this debate about, well, you know, you had the indigenous people, you had some African people here, you had blah, 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 blah. We know all that. Focus. We know all of that. This video is not about that. If you are black, any kind of way, you need to at least visit the motherland once. Because it's amazing. It's healing. It's transforming. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that you're not even going to know you need until you go. Because again, it's stepping away from that abusive relationship, which is the West, and seeing from, the outside in of how abusive it really is. I don't want to make this video too long because it's not much. I feel like, well, it is a lot I can say, but I don't want to drag on. I just hope that I inspire somebody to go and visit. I know that I was led on this journey to each one teach one, to invoke some type of emotions, to make people think about, being black and not even having the motherland on their list of places to travel to in the world. I'm here to bridge that gap. I know that's a part of my journey. I know that's why I'm so passionate about, just Africana studies, black people. Like, I know. I implore you to go back to figure out what is your job and your duty. I implore you to go and walk through that door of no return with the mindset. Try to have the mindset of what they was thinking about, and then turn back around and return with the people that went through so much for you. And although we are still in the struggle today, know that we have options. That this place isn't our only option. 2 more quick things. Did you know that hurricanes start in the Atlantic Ocean? In West Africa, near where the slave castles are, that whole trail starts there. And it traveled all the way to here, America. And every year after year, they land in some of the past heaviest slave states. Ask yourself why. They call it the goddess of Yemaya, the goddess of weather. Do some research on that. You might be fascinated to learn or to know that that's where hurricanes start. They say that's Yemaya, raging down on what happened to her people.